Gregory, you're the first rude smack talking Bengals fan we've had on this chat. Not even a pleasant Saturday morning conversation waiting for college football to begin, and then you gotta start in with that potentially true statement. You son of a bitch. So if you're new to these, listen, the Texans don't have a mic for the reporters, so I have to read and explain the questions to people. This is not me sitting asking questions of Bobby Slowik. For some reasons, it's confusing to people. It's a pain in the butt, I know, but this is my reaction to Bobby Slowik's press conference ahead of the Bengals game. This question was about he was asked about what stood out about quarterback CJ Stroud's performance last week against the Bucks.
Here, really, on an organizational level, how fast we grow, how important it is to keep growing and keep trying to improve, keep moving on, and stuff he'd been working on for, I want to say, like 5-6 weeks, really finally manifested itself in the game. He'd been doing it in practice for a while now, 2-3 weeks at least. Some of the things that we really want to hone in at the quarterback position have shown up in practice and not so much in the games. And it really showed up on Sunday. And then on top of that, he played pretty free. He went out and made plays when play needed to be made, and when the structure of the defense or the play call said I can operate within the structure, he made the right decision and delivered really accurate balls.
That part too, like I think the double moves, I like that. I don't. If there are Bengals fans here that are going to keep hearing me say this over and over again, I believe it so much. It's been so impressive to watch CJ progress from week to week and kind of just fix these things on the fly. So in the Panthers game, CJ afterwards, it sounded like he was calling out Bobby Slowik, and I really genuinely don't think he was, but he was expressing frustration with their inability to push the ball downfield in that Panthers game. And he did in a way like he never sounds like he's bitching about it or anything. He just expressed that frustration. They come out, and I thought they worked the double moves magnificently in that record-breaking performance last week. I think his shoulder shimmy and some of that stuff, his look-offs, all of that have just gotten a little bit more refined. And then some of the adjustments that they've made on routes, like CJ talked about during the game, and this is the big thing. This is the thing that this is what guys like Joe Burrow do, is making adjustments within the game. You've got the game plan, but then, okay, at the end, hey, Noah Brown, run this route a little bit shorter because they're anticipating the break at a certain yardage. A few weeks ago against the Falcons, we saw that touchdown he threw to Dalton Schultz. That was on the fly, on the sideline. They came up with that. Him and Bobby got together. Like, you just start to see more glimmers of sophistication. And last week, obviously, was like a huge display of it. This next question was about the pitch from running back Devin Singletary to quarterback CJ Stroud, and what were his emotions like even after it worked?
Plate with Devin Singletary when he pitched the ball, even after it worked.
Okay, so he's asking, like, what were your emotions during that play? Because that was a classic no, yes type of play. And how did you feel about it afterwards?
Honestly, my emotions after it worked is like you immediately just start getting ready for the next play call, as crazy as that sounds. But like
No, it was kind of
it happens.
You're down there, man.
So fast.
You keep thinking.
When you're under the play clock, you can't spend a lot of time on it. I really didn't stop and think about what Motor did until really the drive was over and he came to the sideline and we were talking about it. But I probably would have had a similar reaction to CJ, like, man, hey, this looks good. Hey, give me the ball. Oh, he really gave me the ball, I mean, it was an unbelievable play by Dev. It was not perfect pitch technique. We got to work on that. I think it was horizontal when he flipped it, like dang near behind his shoulder right there, but it was cool to see.
The other thing about that play was too, it looked a little too much from Singletary's perspective. Remember the pitch that Josh Allen tried to make in the playoff game, the wild card game in Houston, and he got lucky, but like that was old bad Josh Allen before he became the nouveau Josh Allen. But it was like it was into traffic was the problem, and they got lucky and it didn't hurt him. But like with Singletary, there was no traffic there. I think even an errant pitch, like it wasn't going to be as potentially disastrous, although those are kind of scoop and score type situations for the defense.
They said you told him to be careful after the fact. When did you make that comment to him?
So somebody asked him about the the report, I think CJ Stroud said that Bobby Slowik instructed him to be careful on plays like that.
Be careful.
In terms of that play.
Oh, when he got the ball? Yeah. No, I just said make sure you catch it. I would have been. I mean, it was an awesome play, but if he wasn't quite ready for it, or we would have dropped it, or if he would have taken a big hit, I would have. I kind of would have been like, hey, be smarter than that. But we avoided all those situations, so it was an awesome play.
It appeared that you guys.
I think, by the way, that's as far as like the Bengals win versus the Bills, that is the classic. One little play in the game can color everything else. We've seen that with the Texans over the last. They've played basically the same game over the past 4 like NFC South matchups. It's just some of them they've done like one key thing right at the end. Other ones they haven't. This game, like, it was just such an incredible offensive performance from about midway through the second quarter on. But like last week, the Bills were driving on the Bengals, and they made a great throw to Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid coughs it up, and you just can't do that to a team like the Bengals. Like, and this is where the matchup between CJ, who's only thrown 1 interception all year, and this Bengals defense that's been incredibly opportunistic is so intriguing, because the Texans have very much been playing like a 500 football team, which means that if they hadn't been taking care of the ball as well as they had, then they wouldn't be 4-4 right now, I think. So like the turnovers are a key every week. This week especially, can CJ maintain that aggressiveness but also not turn the ball over to an extremely opportunistic defense? That's really the matchup of the day.
Kind of broke some of the tendencies that you guys had on early downs, throwing a little bit more. What kind of went into that, and why do you think it was so effective for you guys?
Yeah, I think every game's different.
So this question was on changing up their tendencies on third down and what went into that.
A lot of what we do is predicated on what a defense wants to take away. And I would say probably, I'm assuming you're referencing a run tendency, considering we threw the ball a ton last game. And really, that tendency didn't build up until probably the last drive of Atlanta, and we were running the ball really effectively. We weren't going to stop, and that whole drive was run and play pass. And then when we got to New Orleans, we got a lead, tipped in the run direction a little bit in the second half, but I wouldn't say it was a great tendency until we played Carolina, and a lot of that was dictated on the structure and what they were trying to do. And we knew we had some plays out there that we missed in the run game and in the pass game, and then Tampa was kind of the opposite. They're like, felt like their intent was, we're not going to let you run the ball. We're not going to let you get back here and just run a lot of play pass versus tough looks for the defense. So, that kind of dictates what we do and how we want to approach every game.
Yeah, I think like this is one of the things I appreciate about Bobby Slowik. Like even like the super intelligent stat nerds in sports media, I think sometimes overly simplify things, and I think some of it comes from them assuming that the coordinators are just dumb jocks, because like the tendencies are still based on pretty small sample sizes. I'm gonna get a little nerdy here myself, but like the tendencies are based on pretty small sample sizes, and then they're further skewed by what defenses are doing to them. So I think sometimes, like in baseball, you see this all the time. Like the wannabe stat nerds will be questioning managerial decisions based on, well, they sent a lefty out versus this guy, or a righty versus this guy. Like those guys are not. A lot of the more analytically minded guys they're thinking about like the shape of pitches and like very specific tendencies versus individual batters, more so than they're thinking about lefty versus righty. Likewise, I think that with Slowik, a lot of the criticism has been, I think, justified. And some of that comes from like, okay, the defense might be telling you that you should be running the ball, but you're still not running the ball. Like you guys are bad at running the football. You guys are haphazard, and like they look like idiots and understanding their blocking assignments. That's the part that's frustrating for me, is that I think Slowik understands the tendencies, and like they've self-scouted. Obviously, he knows about their own tendencies, but sometimes you also have to be very pragmatic about like, well, all right, can I see what's happening in front of me? That like, yeah, we should be able to run the ball right now, but these guys are just incapable of doing it because we haven't coached them well enough, or they're just not inherently good run blockers. Rant over.
Nico was talking about their personnel, but their defense coordinator knew how to remove some of the things that he does that challenge offenses. What have you seen from him?
Okay, so this was I think Aaron Wilson asked about the Bengals and some of the things that Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo does to challenge offenses.
Yeah, they're really sound defense. They're well coached. It shows up on tape. There's almost no freebies that they give. I mean, there's not many wide open people run around the field, and a lot of the run game is earned, especially, I mean, the last 3 weeks, the 3 offenses this defense has played are really good offenses, explosive offenses, and they held all 3 of them to under 20 points. It'll be a big challenge and test for us because we know everything for us just starts with how we're approaching it and how we got to take care of ourselves first, and we've struggled with consistency. Every time we put a game together or a half together, we've really had a hard time coming back and doing it again next week. So the emphasis for us is the same as it was last week. We want to go out and we want to play clean football. And if we play clean football, we feel like we got a shot.
Okay, this is what I forgot. Let me go because I'm gonna have to go back and edit this when I do my preview video, and I add in some of the plays over this. But when it comes to the trap game scenario, and like when usually you think about, well, they played the Bills on prime time, and now they're gonna face the Ravens the week after the Texans. Is this a trap game for the Bengals? Like, this is what you need to understand. This 4-game win streak that the Bengals are on, it started off with the Cardinals. Okay, whatever. And they looked really good, but it was against the Cardinals. They beat the Seahawks, the Niners, the Bills. Now they're going to play the Texans. Then they face the Ravens, Steelers, and the Jaguars. So I like the Ravens and the Steelers, obviously, like whether those teams are good or bad in any given year, the Bengals are going to be looking forward to those games, but especially this year. And then the Jaguars after that. So this is they're dead center sandwiched between 3 marquee games, 3 of which they just played very well versus those 3 opponents. And now they're going to face the Texans. The Texans are not thought of as like haphazard, crappy football team whatsoever. But there's, I think, perhaps a natural emotional letdown there. So I'm willing to entertain the trap game dynamic more so than I usually would be.
I thought he did really well. Similar to JP, like we didn't have any.
So he was asked here about. He's asked on Michael Dieter and his performance on the offensive line. For our Bengals fans who are in attendance, Michael Dieter is the center who's now the 4th center who has started in front of CJ Stroud. CJ's rookie quarterback has had 4 centers, 2 of them rookies. The middle 2, the second and third ones were rookies. Michael Dieter filled in last week and did, I thought, pretty well given the circumstances versus Vita Vea, one of the better nose tackles in the league.
Any misassignment, mental errors as far as calls. He was really clean on that, which is obviously a huge part of what the center has to do. He did really good in the run game. I know we didn't run the ball a ton against Tampa, but in particular in the second half when we started running it a little more, he showed up in a positive light for sure, helping capture some holes right there. And then in protection, like I said, he got everyone where they needed to go. And the few times he had one-on-ones in pass pro, he stood up. So we were really pleased.
It's really it's one of the better things that's happened because of the relaxed practice squad rules, like expanded practice squads. You can have veterans on the practice squad, and then the IR rules where you can bring guys back after 4 games. I think it's made it a lot more fun for teams that are banged up because look, you don't have your favorite guys in there, but a lot of times now you're elevating guys from the practice squad who've been practicing on the team the whole year, and then you can put them back down. They're veteran players. And it's not like, I think that's one of the reasons that games are more competitive now. Maybe that's some of the reason for the parity. It's really started to catch up to where teams think about the entire 70 plus guys they have in the building more so than just the 53 on the active roster. And Dieter did a good job. Does Juice Scruggs still exist? I don't know, man. You know what happens to hamstrings on the Texans? They tear and then they never recover. Derek Stingley, fingers crossed. I feel like if I cross a finger for Derek Stingley, I'm going to tear a finger muscle. But Derek Stingley, full participant in practice this week. I might end up playing on Sunday. So there we go.
What game plan get ready for until you guys can't physically practice?
Yeah.
Okay. Notice, it's playing on my computer speakers. If I take my earbuds out, I can hear it. So you guys might be able. Let me know if you're able to hear those questions as I play those or not, because I can barely hear them. He was asked about adjusting adjusting the game plan based on injuries and guys who can't physically practice?
I think that there's a lot that goes into that, and I'd say at this point in the season, we've had a lot of repetitions at how exactly we go about that. But it kind of, there's some plays during the week, like if you put in, or if we want to hit and we want to possibly attack a certain hole in the defense, but we know like we need to get this repped with a specific individual on this specific route to really feel comfortable about doing this play. And then there's other plays where we've been running something like this since camp, or we feel really comfortable about all our guys running this or blocking this. And it's more mental work, off-field preparation. Even if necessarily you don't get the rep, we still feel confident when you get in the game, you can go execute. So there's definitely a balance there. And you got to be aware, there's a number of packages, I would say almost every week, that we have up that don't ever make it to the game because, the specific person it's made for doesn't make it to the game. So that's part of the preparation process, which I think is mostly what it is. And what a lot of offensive coordinating is it's a lot of weekly preparation. So by the time you get to Sunday, all the work's already put in. The hay's already in the barn, not just for me, not just for the coaching staff, but for the players as well. And the stuff that you couldn't necessarily rep, you just have to devote more off-field time to if you feel something that can be accomplished.
The cool thing about that is that it's got to be hard to work on all that stuff, and then you just got to exercise it from the game plan. I think, though, too, we've seen multiple instances this year where they have run stuff that maybe they hadn't practiced, like that touchdown throw to Tank Dell last week was that was the one, right, that they hadn't run in forever since training camp. I might be mixing up my weeks here, but there have been a few instances that, or they've done things where they've tweaked routes and they've made adjustments to packages that they're running. Dalton Schultz, I think, that's where his veteran savvy has started to show up. And, I was skeptical of Dalton Schultz at the beginning because there were a lot of miscommunications during training camp. He's really started to look a lot more like a veteran guy in the pass game since then. And his run blocking and pass protection, I'm not super stoked by, but I've gone back and I've tried to be unemotional about it. And I do appreciate the times where he does do a good job. There's curious times where I feel like he just kind of goes mentally like out to lunch a little bit. But if he gets 10 catches for 130 yards this week, I'll be cool with it. Okay, so he's asked, you spend more time with CJ Stroud than anybody else on the team. Can you put your finger on what makes him special?
Cares an immense amount, for someone that's.
Let me get that so I can.
Guys.
Let me be sure that we hear that right.
Can you put your finger on what makes him special?
He cares an immense amount, for someone that's new to the organization, new to the franchise, with a different and brand new group of players that, different than college. He spent 4 years with a lot of the guys he was with in Columbus, and here it's brand new faces all around. And you could tell, like, he cares a great deal about winning. He cares a lot about the organization being successful. He cares a lot about his fellow teammates being successful, and how much energy he devotes to that, I think, just shows through the course of conversation. There's not many conversations that I think anyone on the team has had with CJ where you would say he's not present. He's a very present person, and he's very emotionally and mentally invested on a personal level and in what we're trying to do football-wise. I think that shows through in many, many different areas that I've referenced before, all the way up to this point.
Okay, this is where I kiss up to Ohio State fans a little bit, and honestly, this is 100%. I believe this 100%. Ryan Day did a great service to the Houston Texans in really conscientiously working on CJ Stroud's leadership skills. CJ has talked about this. I know Ohio State fans probably know this, but that's what's been impressive to me, because as Bobby Slowik is talking about how much CJ cares, like that goes, man, a lot of people, it's way more complex than just caring, because there are a lot of quarterbacks who care, and it ends up making them horrible leaders because they care a lot, but they don't know how to communicate it, and they let it get to them emotionally when things don't go well. The most impressive thing CJ has done as a leader, I think, as a young guy, is that there have been plenty of opportunities where he could have gotten super frustrated with either himself or other people on that team. And I kind of like, I look for it. I look for little chinks in the armor to see if that's creeping in. The only time it maybe looked like it was a little bit was after that Panthers game. And in hindsight, looking at it, and I went back and I watched the press conference where he talked about wanting to push the ball down the field more. He's doing it very, he's talking about it very pragmatically. Like he's not talking about it with any kind of frustration or anything. He was more talking about it like strategically about what we need to do. And Ryan Day has talked to him about that a lot. You know, Ryan Day talked to him about his body language. Ryan Day, I think, really did a great job in letting CJ know how he presents himself emotionally, like how people read his body language. Like people are paying attention to that with a quarterback. And there are a lot of young quarterbacks, whether it's Eli Manning or, you know, Cam Newton. They did it in different ways, but they didn't have great body language. Like CJ's way ahead of the curve in that respect. So that part of it's true. That part of it's been really, really good. Like he cares, but he knows how to channel caring. And the other part too is just caring about his fellow teammates. Like he's had a few moments when he's talked about caring about his teammates. He talks about like caring for their families and knowing that, hey, Tank Dell has to provide for his family, or I got to help Nico Collins provide for his family. Like it feels like he takes genuine responsibility for the guys on his team. He doesn't want to see them do well. Like he just wants to see them do well in life. It's really cool. And I'm probably getting, it probably sounds like it sounds corny as hell. Like how excited I get by it, but I can't, I can't help it. It's the way I feel. I've seen a lot of young quarterbacks. I've never seen guys handle it quite the same way as CJ. That doesn't mean it's better or worse than other guys. I've just never seen anybody handle it quite the way he has.
Yeah, I would say.
He was asked a question about whether not having a kicker in the game last week. Remember, well, he had a kicker. His name was Dare Gumbawale, but not having a named kicker on the roster, if that affected his play calling.
The only thing that really changed was third down going into fourth down. You know, first, second down didn't adjust much. You know, we were confident in what we were doing, and we were going to keep doing it. And the only difference really becomes when you get into high red areas, normal field goal areas, you knew rather than punt, we were going to be aggressive on fourth. And the only thing that changes is third down calls as far as, knowing maybe I could call a more conservative third down call, and we still have fourth down as an opportunity. It happened once in the red zone where we had a third down call that, you know, we knew we could take a pretty aggressive op in the end zone because we felt confident about a fourth down call as well. And that really was about the only time it came up as far as changing what we were doing. And then the 2 points, obviously, which we had gone into the game. We were already prepped with 2-point plays and 2-point thoughts, not necessarily 3 of them, you know, but that's always something we talk about.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty straightforward, unless I missed some BS there. Like Slowik's been pretty straightforward about, I think, honestly, being critical of himself, but also, acknowledging whether something affected them or not. Sorry, I thought we had a bird in a bird feeder that my wife's been waiting for it to be occupied. It's not. It's empty. I like the one thing I wondered about was, and like not to get too deep in the weeds about this, but taking a knee at the end of the game there. Like I wonder in that instance, obviously why you're doing it is because the chance of a blocked extra point there is a lot higher than normal. And in that case, they could return it for a 2-point conversion. Should that be more of a standard protocol with teams, even if they do have a kicker? Because the chance of you kicking it off and them, if you squib kick it, the chance of that, I guess then they've got 2 potential plays for something weird to happen. Blocked extra points are rare, but not incredibly rare. Whereas like a last play hook and ladder on a gotta have it situation, that's pretty rare too. I don't know. That's a discussion for a podcast, not this ridiculously long live stream that I'm doing. Okay, so he was asked if he feels like there's enough cross-trained guys to be a blocking tight end. Okay, so if Andrew Beck can't go, which he can't, at the time this question was asked, they didn't know. Are there enough guys cross-trained who can be a blocking tight end if Andrew Beck is out? And he's also asked about getting wide receiver Robert Woods back at practice today.
Yeah, it's been awesome to see really all the guys that have been fighting through some injury just continuing to work and trying as hard as they can to get back out there. But as it relates to the fullback spot, like we always, especially when you're a team that really believes in 21 personnel, you always cross-train guys. So you referenced
21 personnel is having 2 backs in the backfield, 1 tight end.
Dalton obviously has some fullback background. Our tight ends have had, like, we make sure they get fullback work even when Beck's up in just in case scenarios, so that you make sure you're good on fits and where you want to be in the run game and what we want to do in the pass game. A lot of times, we make that variable compared to 11 personnel, which kind of becomes its own thing.
So 11 personnel is 1 tight end, one running back, and 3 wide receivers. I guess the advantage they have here really is, like, I like Andrew Beck a lot, but he's a work in progress when it comes to being a fullback. I've never once this season felt like they have anything other than a tight end playing fullback. Like Beck has not made that transition to where, like, oh wow, he's a fullback more than a tight end. It's been very much like a tight. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to mention this when we did our preview. Okay. Andrew Beck feels very much like a tight end playing fullback. I did not realize that the tight ends coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, who had all 3 of their tight ends involved last week. Texans, by the way, have been awful at stopping the tight end. It's a real weakness of theirs. The tight ends coach is James Casey. James Casey, who was the ultimate tight end who could play fullback, the H-back for the Texans, back with Gary Kubiak, is the tight ends coach for the Bengals. And I freaking love James Casey. James Casey was one of those guys that was, went to Rice, was a like basically he played baseball, like got a scholarship at Rice by sending out tapes, probably VHS tapes, to just hundreds of football coaches. Rice was the only team that even gave him a call. He goes to Rice. He's got a really cool story about just basically reading all kinds of self-help motivational books all the time just to get himself amped up and channeled. And he ends up playing in the NFL for a long time, coach for University of Houston. Now he's up in Cincinnati. So one more reason, as much as I'm growing to admire a lot of people on this Bengals team, including DJ Reader, who's still up there, that I'll feel bad after the Texans upset them tomorrow. But I respect them, damn it.
I would say
Okay, so he's asked, how much time does he put in keying in on a defensive coordinator's tendencies?
all the way up to the game. There's a process I go through that I do think, like, game plan and putting together a game plan and attacking a scheme is very different than attacking a coordinator. Like, they're 2 separate things, which it takes a while to figure out, but once you separate the processes, really you nail one down, and then for me, I go on and then I start to nail the other down, really all the way through the week leading up to the game, which is, getting a feel for play calls, getting a feel for situations, what we want to run, where, and why. What the toughest one is what can change from what he's already put on tape, because oftentimes against our scheme, our system, defenses try to do something like a new wrinkle that they haven't necessarily shown on tape that shows up pretty often, that we always kind of cover our bases on. And again, that's a later in the week process, but I would say it goes all the way up to the game. I mean, literally in the locker room up to the game.
That's a scary thing about being a coordinator in the NFL or college, especially. College, I think there's just more unknown, and half the time you can't even keep guys' numbers straight. It's easier to maybe go with it. Where in the NFL, where it's there's just so much time to prepare with and then work with the guys, and so many wrinkles you can add, especially when you got veteran players, you can add little wrinkles more so than you can in college. It's like whenever I try to envision myself being a coordinator in the NFL, I get an image of, like, In a Beautiful Mind, when all those equations and everything are going back and forth. And, like, if that were me, like, how quickly it would turn to nachos and, like, old episodes of Seinfeld and various other things. I would just, it's too much. It's too much.
Quick follow-up. How much does the scheme versus the defense coordinator, how much does it overlap?
Okay, so he said how much is the scheme, and okay, how much do the scheme and the defensive coordinator overlap is what he asked.
You always want to stick within your scheme, right? So, which I think is what you're asking. But as far as how much we change depending on.
How much does, you said the coordinator versus the defense coordinator versus the scheme that they're running, how much does that
Well,
Okay, so he said because Bobby Slowik had mentioned that there's a difference between attacking the coordinator and attacking the scheme. So I think he's just asking for clarification on that.
it definitely overlaps in that. Say it's a 3-4 scheme that believes in 3 deep, and you play 2 coordinators in back-to-back weeks that do that. Like the scheme is going to be the same, and what you attack is usually going to be the same when you get that defense. It's what other defenses did they do that's maybe a little different than the one you played the week before, because that changes your offset answers. You might love your 3 deep play, but now the first week I just had to answer quarters. The second week they don't run quarters, but they run Tampa 2. That completely could change our backside and how we want to get there and what we want to do. It could change what we want to do on a front side combination. Like, it's just little minutia like that, that on a week-to-week basis always changes. And even through the course of a year when you play the same coordinator, typically tends to change because everyone evolves as you go.
Okay, so immediately as he's saying that, I can't help but think of Vic Fangio, because people love talking and breaking down like this is what Vic Fangio does and this is what he loves to do. I saw the same thing happen with Wade Phillips. I'm an old head now, so I've got a little bit of history with all of this. So I played for Vic Fangio, and it's just hilarious to me when they talk about how the Vic Fangio scheme is the 2 deep safeties and it's for this reason and that reason. Like, the Vic Fangio scheme is figuring out what his players do best. And yeah, when he had, like, in San Francisco, where Vic Fangio used to tell me about how much it's like ideally you can play cover 2, because if you can stop the run with 7 guys up front, then it gives you all kinds of ability to do everything else. Like, just stopping the run with 7 up front, it starts with there. But depending on who's available due to injury, what the skills were of various guys, what your rushers were like at various times. Like, there have been times where a Vic Fangio scheme was a boatload of cover 1 and cover 7. Wade Phillips, for a long time it was all two man, right? I remember Jay Foreman had played for Wade Phillips when he was in Buffalo, but then also in Houston. And then I was watching a game with him in Houston. Jay was with me in Houston. He didn't play for Wade Phillips in Houston, but we were watching a game together in Houston. And like, the defense and the coverages that Wade Phillips were calling in Houston were completely different than when Jay had been in Buffalo. So it's like, guys get really good. It's really an insult to those defensive coordinators when you think that, oh yeah, this is what they like and this is what they're good at. Like, Belichick's the ultimate for having, 1 year they're a 4-3, the next year they're a 3-4. He figures out what the scheme is. So I think like Bobby Slowik's kind of an historian in that way too. He's not going to get duped into thinking like, oh yeah, okay, we're facing I don't know, let's say if it was a Lovie Smith defense or something, he wouldn't just act like, oh yeah, I know exactly what Lovie Smith's doing. We're gonna see nothing but Tampa 2. I mean, he might be kind of right, but yeah.
Yeah.
So this was question on how much the scheme and he already did that. Okay. He was asked about the adjustments that this offense will have to make against the Bengals.
They're on the field way less right now, and I think that's mainly like third downs have been tough the last couple of weeks when I'm watching the film. And then the big thing that they've tightened up their tackling, and they've really tightened up. Like, they haven't given up as many explosives the last.
When he says they're on the field way less right now, I believe he's probably talking about a combination of the Bengals offense has just been doing, they just look really good. They're just sustaining drives. They're taking up time of possession. So you're not getting as many reps. And then the Bengals are getting off the field on third down. They look like they're peaking. If I were a pessimistic Bengals fan, I'd be like, somebody that just sees the negative in everything. They're peaking too soon.
Couple of weeks. So they've taken advantage of first, second down to get into good third down spots. And it's just, I referenced this earlier, but we want to play clean football. They've been playing clean football. It's been on tape now for 3 weeks, where I think there's not many mental mistakes, poor technique, poor fundamentals. That's just not on their tape. They're solid football players all the way around with really good coaches and a good D-line that can get after the quarterback. So, we know it's a test, and we're testing ourselves to see how consistent we can be. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, so, and we'll get to the Matt Burke stuff here in a minute. Let's see. Another Bengals fan. Gregory, you're the first rude smack talking Bengals fan we've had on this chat. Nothing but pleasant pleasant Saturday morning conversation waiting for college football to begin. And then you got to start in with that potentially true statement. You son of a bitch. Yeah, I don't know. The big question, Gregory, is I assume positive intent on this. So I'm one of these elevated new age types. Been doing a lot of shrooms. Um, the Texans are not winning in Cincy with your defense. The one thing I'd say is that I do think if the Texans win this game, it will be a relative shootout. And the question comes down, as discussed, in a lot of ways, to CJ has been very good at taking care of the football. The Bengals defense has been very, very good at taking the ball away. CJ is not going to have Nico Collins, and that's an issue because I think so far I believe Tank Dell and Nico Collins have created this kind of symbiosis the same way DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller used to complement each other. If they can get Robert Woods back, and you have this emergence of Noah Brown, who's been very good used in conjunction with these guys, I think that's it doesn't completely replace Nico Collins, but I do think that they're able to spread the ball around way more than they had been able to the first few weeks. As far as the Bengals go, yes, the Bengals do not have T. Higgins. Jamar Chase being banged up is an issue, but Joe Burrow, the biggest thing, honestly, Jamar Chase or no Jamar Chase, is that Joe Burrow used those tight ends really effectively last week. Former Houston Texans player James Casey is the tight ends coach, and the Texans have been just atrocious versus tight ends. My biggest concern facing the Bengals, honestly, isn't Jamar Chase. Certainly not T. Higgins now. It's not Boyd. Like Boyd and Chase, yes, they are known issues, and those are going to be known problems. The Texans can play bend but don't break, stay up top for everything better than anybody. Like, I think that they can at least try to potentially bottle up those guys, not shut them down, but limit how much damage they can do. The tight ends are what I really worry about. The Texans have just been atrocious versus tight ends. And Joe Burrow knows that. So that's my concern. But I admire the confidence in your team. There's very little merit to your statement. Seth doing darkness retreat confirmed. Bucks, Jags, and Pittsburgh thought the same thing. Old Grego. That's right. Old Grego.